We need a name for the podcast, and I was thinking we could go with something just kind of completely innocuous in that, and I was just thinking like that one sports podcast,
Yeah,
just something
yeah, I
simple.
like it.
That one sports podcast.
If
Hey,
if
you listen to
something
that
comes
sports?
to me,
You listen to that podcast? Which podcast? That sports podcast. What sports
uh,
podcast? That sports podcast. Oh,
yeah,
you mean that sports podcast? Yeah, I'd watch that. I'd listen to it. It's pretty cool.
yeah. Pretty soon, people would be like, "It's that sports podcast."
Exactly.
Emphasis on it.
Exactly.
So we got some work to do first before we do that. And
All right. So thank you for watching another episode of That Sports Podcast. I'm Brandon, and as always, Anthony is with me. Tonight we wanted to get started with the Chicago Bulls and DeMar DeRozan. Why? Because they're not getting enough attention, simply. Um, they're playing really good basketball right now, and they are not getting enough attention. So, Anthony, why
Mhm.
aren't they getting enough attention? Like, what is going on in the NBA to where we're not hearing about the best teams in the NBA?
Hey, Brandon, yeah, when it comes to the Bulls, in second place in the Eastern Conference, and they were in first place for the first half of the season or whatever. So they've been doing excellent all season long, and the spotlight is not on the Chicago Bulls and Michael Jordan's former franchise because they don't have a superstar like a LeBron James, like a Stephen Curry, who everybody knows, just on recognizing their name, who's a household name. I think DeMar DeRozan amongst basketball fans is really well known. And then people, like me who follow the sport, but, not diehard fans, I know him, but I think, it's just the Bulls aren't, quite standing out to people for some reason. That's basically what I think. And, they've been playing great, and it's a shame, isn't it, Brandon? I mean,
It's definitely a shame that DeMar DeRozan and the Bulls' success is being overshadowed by the failures of LeBron James and Kyrie Irving and the Nets and the Lakers, respectively, to each of their superstars wherever they're playing. Um, it's a travesty. It really is. It's bad to see that the NBA has, or news, whatever you want to call it, is so centric around these big name players and their failures that people who are having success can't get get their name out there, right? Like DeMar DeRozan has played under the radar for years now. If he wins a title and stuff like that, how much of his success, how much are they going to talk about his success versus how much are they going to talk about the Lakers losing or the Nets not making it or whatever and stuff like that, right? Like if it comes down to DeMar DeRozan and going against Kyrie Irving in the playoffs to see who goes to the next round, and DeMar DeRozan and the Bulls outplay the Nets, the story is going to be about how the Nets failed and not about how DeMar DeRozan succeeded and stuff like that. And to me, that's that's bad for sports, because us as sports fans, we love basketball and stuff like that. So when we want to hear about all the good teams, we want to hear about how everybody else in the league is doing. We don't want to keep talking about all the crap teams. We know they're crap teams. The Lakers have been a crap team for pretty much the entire season. Like, it's not been a secret, you know what I mean? Like, this wasn't something that happened overnight. They didn't just lose LeBron James and then their playoff hopes started to go down. No, like, they've had different stretches of times where all the guys were healthy out there. They traded and they got some more people. They've done whatever they needed to do and whatever else is going on out there. But at the end of the day, we don't need to keep talking about how LeBron James is failing, because LeBron James is not the only person in the NBA.
yeah. And sometimes it seems like he is, because even if his team's not doing well, he seems to always be in the news. Or there's somebody's speculating that he's getting traded somewhere. And I understand that trade speculation is part of what the media covers. And, obviously, if you're a superstar player, you're going to get attention in that regard. But it just seems that, geez, every time I put on ESPN First Take, it's like, hey, instead of talking about, a team that is overachieving this year like the Bulls are in a big way, you know, it's never about that. Like, it's okay to like talk about LeBron because he said something and you got to talk about it. But why aren't we giving more attention? I think that's what it's about. Why aren't we giving more attention to these? I like to call them grassroots teams. They're teams that are, they're built on, good, honest, hardworking players, and they don't have they're not a super team, you know? So why are we giving like, geez, I mean, even at the people in the First Take or ESPN or those shows or whatever, they know basketball. They have people come on all the time. I mean, where's Tim Legler or something like that, or one of those analysts. I'm trying to think who's the basketball analyst.
I mean, when they talk to Kendrick Perkins up there and stuff like that. I mean, they have
Yeah,
some guys on there who talk basketball. They talk basketball all the time. The truth of the matter is that they can't keep LeBron James and Kyrie Irving out of their mouths. That's it. That's all they want to talk about. They want to talk. It's easier for them to talk about somebody else's failure than it is about somebody else's success, because the failures are what people are sort of really drawn to, because no matter who you are, you like hearing about LeBron James winning or you like hearing about him lose. So, like I said, at some point, though, we have to get off of LeBron James and get away from Kyrie Irving, because the Nets and the Lakers aren't the only two teams in the NBA. There are teams and players out there right now who are playing phenomenal basketball that are just flying under the radar simply because LeBron James and the Lakers are trash. Same with the Nets. So
right.
now that we've talked about the Lakers, let's move on to another big question coming out of LA. How much of the mess in LA is LeBron's fault?
All right, here we go. I mean, I think a lot of it, if not all of it, because listen, this team was put together by LeBron James. It's not even a question. Sometimes you can look at a super team like the Nets, for example, they're the ever super team around. So, Brandon, did Kevin Durant put that team together?
Not as far as I know. I believe that was Kyrie Irving. A lot of that was Kyrie Irving's doing.
Okay.
I'm sure that they probably all talked behind the scenes and how great it would be to play together and stuff like that. And somehow they managed to make it happen. But at the end of the day, I don't think that it was any one player out there. If we could say any one player out there was the mastermind behind it all. Yeah, Kyrie definitely had a hand in it. He was out there first. He was the first one out there. And then, when he went out there, Kevin Durant his contract with Golden State was about up, so it's natural that he wanted to go somewhere else. I mean, I wouldn't have wanted to go anywhere else. Staying out in Golden
Yeah.
State was probably the best thing for his career. It gave him, a team that he could actually rely on, instead of, Kyrie Irving, who sat out most of the league, and they're just like he ha, he's fighting for rights and stuff like that. Meanwhile, they're not winning a championship, overshadowing people who are actually doing good in basketball because they're failing at basketball. I mean, it's just a whole bunch of nonsense to me. So when it boils down to it, that's what I think. I think if anybody had a hand in it, it was Kyrie Irving.
Well, first of all, very interesting that you point out that Durant, I think that's what you said, right? Durant should have stayed in Golden State. And it makes a lot of sense, honestly. I mean, you have Steve Kerr there, a great coach who proved himself. Listen, the Golden State Warriors from 2015 to 18 or whatever, when they won their 3 titles, Stephen Curry's a great player. He's not blessed with the greatest physical abilities. He's not, he's 6'3" or something like that. I mean, this team was brilliantly coached. The players were brilliant, and that's how they won. And it's the opposite of a super team where you're taking the best player on the Warriors and Durant, bringing him over, the best player on the Celtics and Kyrie Irving, bringing him over. And you're trying to just mishmash a team together and go out there and say you're gonna win the title, and that it just doesn't work that way, Brandon. It doesn't, and that's what the Nets are finding out, and in a really shocking fashion. I mean, one of the big three left essentially with James Harden, and I don't know if you saw, but the other night he whooped my Knicks.
Oh yeah, he put it on the Knicks, man. I'm trying to tell you, Harden is loving his time out there so far. It looks like. I mean, he doesn't seem like he has a complaint in the world.
No, it's interesting because throughout his career, I would say that he has a lot to complain about in a way. I mean, he's been a great offensive player, and when he went to Houston, they didn't necessarily put the team around him to win in the playoffs. So I think he went to a conference finals once, maybe. But he's looking for, at this point, he's right in his prime. He's maybe got a few years of that left, and he wants to win a championship. So he was going to the Nets thinking, hey, listen, that is a sure thing. I'm going to get Kevin Durant and Irving. Oh, sign me up for it right now. But then, he couldn't foresee that Kyrie Irving wasn't going to get vaccinated and all that, and then falling apart. But we'll see what he does with the 76ers. That's also an interesting team to watch.
Yeah, the Sixers are an interesting team to watch now. Yeah, I agree. I think if we're saying LeBron does deserve the most of the blame on that. At the end of the day, like you said, you can't just grab a whole bunch of high priced players and try to buy yourself a championship. It doesn't always work like that. Yeah, the Lakers have had where they got one title with that formula right now. So at the end of the day, basketball isn't football. You can't just bring in the top basketball. You need one star, and then you need the supporting cast. You need that one guy who can carry the team and really put the team on his back and stuff like that. But they've got to have the supporting cast to really fill in those role spots and stuff like that, and really come in the clutch to help secure the edges and stuff like that. Because as great as one talented player is, Michael Jordan didn't win all them damn championships by himself. He won with that great supporting cast, but that supporting cast wasn't going to win without Michael Jordan. They proved it. Every one of them, they proved it. They all left and did what after Scottie Pippen? He didn't go back to another title after that, did he? He didn't win another championship after that, did he? You know what I mean? So like these guys proved that without Michael Jordan, it's not that they weren't nothing. It was just that they couldn't win another title. You know what I mean? Like they were Michael Jordan supporting cast, and Michael Jordan, was the one who could carry them. But you don't see that with LA. LeBron and the Lakers have been out there. LeBron's been healthy most of the season. If I'm not mistaken, he's played the majority of the games up to this point. So if LeBron James is the king and, he's the end all be all and the best player in the league, why are the Lakers still only in ninth place, almost looking like they're about to be bounced out of the playoffs entirely?
Yeah. I think, LeBron's obviously had a great career. What's going on there is that I think it's chemistry between him and Westbrook and just them. It could be off the court stuff as well. I mean, obviously, if you're losing, you're going to have some problems with guys and stuff like that. So there's a lot going on there with the Lakers. But I guess what you pointed out there is that, yes, they do have some superstars, but maybe not the great supporting cast.
Yeah. So the Nets are looking like they are trying to save their playoff hopes, and I don't know exactly what they're hoping. Kevin Durant made his comeback. So how effective can Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and Ben Simmons be? There's less than 20 games left in the season, and the Nets are what, seventh, eighth place or something like that. Like they weren't very high in the standings. Yeah. So how effective can they be going into this last stretch of games and then going into the playoffs if they make it?
Well, yeah, it's crunch time for Steve Nash and the Nets. I think last night with a loss, they went to the 500 mark, so they're exactly 32-32, and it's just like, man, I mean, yeah, they have less than 20 games left. They have to win most of them. How effective can they be? I mean, obviously, if Ben Simmons comes in and gives them a huge shot in the arm, I think that's going to help a lot. Because obviously they don't have Kyrie Irving for a lot of these games. So, and then that may be changing. I think there's reports I saw in the Daily News today that Eric Adams, the mayor of New York City, is going to think about lifting the mandate, or he did already, maybe. So we'll see. I mean, again, a lot of damage has been done to the Nets before this mandate goes down, right, Brandon?
Yeah. I looking at the Nets, I don't necessarily know that they're any more effective than they were when Harden was there, right? Like at this point, they've got a guy who can play some defense, but is very one-dimensional on the offensive side of the ball. His jump shot leaves a lot to be desired. He's not going to sink a lot of clutch shots. He's going to want to drive to the basket a lot. He's going to want to get as close to the basket as he can and stuff like that. And how does that help Kevin Durant? How does that help Kyrie Irving? You know what I mean? Because they can't really space the floor with him, right? Like they're not going to keep passing it around. He's got to be the one facilitating the passes to them, whereas they can't facilitate passes to him. You know what I'm saying? Because they pass it to him, he's not going to hit that jumper. They need somebody to hit that three, to catch him back up, or to increase the lead or whatever. They need him to hit that shot. He's probably not doing it. He's probably trying to hit that pump fake and drive to the basket. Maybe get an and one. Maybe he gets the bucket. Maybe he gets an and one. I don't know. We don't know. But his offense is very one dimensional. So I don't see him helping out the Nets at any way really, other than defense, right? And the Nets' biggest problem wasn't their defense. Right, like the Nets' biggest problem was not their defense. It's not the fact that they couldn't play defense. It's just that there weren't enough of them playing defense. Right, like if more of them were playing deep, bringing in Ben Simmons is not going to keep other teams from running the score up on them. Right, Ben Simmons is not going to stop everybody on the other team from scoring. So while their big problem seems like it was defense, it's not that they went out and fixed that problem. Right, like their biggest problem was that they weren't playing basketball as a team. You had a bunch of people out there looking to get each individually get their cookies and stuff like that, and that's it. So they need to play as a team, and if Ben Simmons can come in here and change that dynamic, which I don't think he will, he's not going to bring in any more camaraderie, them tightening up on defense a little bit more and stuff like that, getting hustling a little bit more, getting some rebounds. I don't think Kevin Durant's that guy either. As much as Kevin Durant is a phenomenal player and he's been a difference off the court, I mean, we saw it. As soon as he went out, they plummeted. So Kevin Durant isn't gonna him being on the court is his presence there is gonna be game changing, as he's the X factor, but at the same time, is it gonna be enough to keep them from falling out of playoff contention? Maybe not. I don't think so. I don't know. I can't say with 100% certainty that they even make the playoffs. There are teams that are playing better basketball right now that are sneaking up on them, and there's less than 20 games left. They just lost last night, you said. So now they're 32-32. I mean, there are teams that are hungry right behind them, chomping at the bit, trying to get in there. And even if they do make it into the playoffs, they're still going to be a 7 seed or an 8 seed, maybe a 6 seed if they get on a win streak or something like that. But I don't see any of that happening. I just see the Brooklyn Nets falling apart the last half of the season, missing the playoffs. Same with the Lakers.
Wow. Yeah, it's dramatic. It's a dramatic drop off for them. I wonder how much like the pride of each of these superstars, Kevin Durant, Irving obviously doesn't really care too much about the team and pride because
nope, not at all. Not even a little bit.
Not at all because of what he's doing.
Exactly.
But Ben Simmons as well. And then, other guys, Blake Griffin, it goes on and on. Steve Nash. I mean, Steve Nash wants to make sure that his what do you call it, what people think of him now as a head coach is that he oversaw the destruction of a super team. So
that'll be his legacy.
Yeah, right. So there's pressure is what I'm trying to say on each of these guys sort of individually to make sure that this team doesn't dissolve. And so what I'm wondering, Brandon, is will that motivate them enough to make a difference here?
Nope.
Not at all.
Right, let's move on.
All right.
So college football rule change. They want to make the game a little bit shorter by, changing little things, kickoff, the timer starts as soon as the ball's kicked, not when it's caught. When the refs will restart the clock, not the snap and stuff like that. So they're making these changes. They want to make these changes in hopes to, shorten the game, to make less plays, less chance for these college athletes to get hurt. Anthony, do you think it'll be good for the game of college football? Yes or no?
Yes. I initially had some misgivings about, like the incomplete passes, keeping the clock running. I thought that was a little tacky there. I think about, at the end of games where, you're making trying to make a drive at the end or whatever. And, you want to keep the clock, as much as you can of it. But, more and more, I think the bigger picture here is, keeping the college football athletes healthy on their way to the pros, right? And making sure that the college game is as safe as possible. They're trying to make it safer with these rules, and I think it's a good thing.
Yeah, I would only be really curious to see how it affects the timing of the game. How much shorter is it expected to be? I understand that the kickoff and those little things, they might not seem like they'll take up a lot of time, or that they'll shorten the game a lot. But when you have those little consecutive things, like you said, the ball doesn't stop, at the time doesn't stop with an incompletion, so the clock keeps running. How much time does that actually run off of the game and everything like that? So that's my only thing I'm really interested in, just from the viewership point, the fan aspect of watching it and everything like that. But as somebody who's cognizant of the fact that they want to make it safer, yeah, I'm all for it. I think it'll be good for the game. I think a lot of college players will make it, out of college with less injuries and stuff like that. There's less chance of injury, less plays, less people running into each other at full speed and stuff. When they become adults and they go, I mean, not that become adults, but when they go pro and it's their career, their livelihood for the rest of their life, that's something that they can deal with. But right now they're in college, you know what I mean? They still have the rest of their lives ahead of them, so to speak. They haven't committed to playing football for the rest of their lives, or, signing some big contract. They're still doing it, for some school and, for pride and bragging rights. They're not necessarily collecting a big paycheck and everything like that, and securing their financial freedom for the rest of their lives. So I think it'll be good for football.
Well, can I just say one thing? Is that it's interesting how they just passed a law allowing college athletes to profit off their name, image, and likeness in most states. So it's interesting that this kind of comes up in that climate where college athletes are having more opportunities to, get paid for their, whatever, selling endorsements, making endorsement deals essentially. So it's interesting that they're trying to make the game safer now, so that maybe these players can stay healthy and continue profiting off their, you know what I mean? It's kind of, I don't know, maybe I just threw in a monkey wrench there, but I think, listen, they're trying to do that now so that, for what? That's what my thing is what is the end game here? Is it so that college athletes who are really good, who are going to go to the pros, don't get devastating injuries? Or what's the real tangible, in your opinion, benefit from changing these rules in
Keeping the
college
kids,
football?
keeping the players healthy. I mean, who wants to go to a football game and the star player's not playing?
Okay. So yeah, I mean, it's mostly
It's all
about,
about protecting their investment.
right. But the college game. So like the quality,
Still an
preserving that
investment.
quality. Yeah.
I mean, there's still a ton of money that's invested in that. So
Right.
anyway, let's
Right.
move on to the MLB lockout. Rob Manfred was seen, practicing his golf swing. People say it's tone deaf. Personally, I think that, a lot of these people aren't putting it in the perspective of Rob Manfred is not the CEO of Kellogg's, right? Like, these are pro athletes who are complaining about not making enough money, not getting enough money. There not being enough money put into whatever resources and stuff like that. Like, these people are making hundreds of $1 millions a year, and they're acting like, Rob Manfred should be sleeping less at night because they're not playing baseball. It's like every one of these baseball players right now could not play baseball again for the rest of their lives. And a lot of them would be pretty well off, whether they cashed in on, just being a pro baseball player, whether they actually cashed in on having a big contract, whether they got an endorsement deal, or whether they can do TV, whatever it might be. A lot of these guys have exposure that a lot of people wouldn't get, and they can build off of that, or they have built off of that, right? So at the end of the day, I don't think it's a bad look. I think Manfred should be sleeping quite well at night, because none of these rich baseball players are coming up off of any money going, you know what, I don't need $300 million over 7 years, so you guys can take that out of my contract and then pay the younger guys to do that, right? Like, if all the richest players in the MLB were to all decide collectively that they're going to take a collective pay cut from the hundreds of millions they're already making, just to make sure that the guys below them could be taken care of, I'm sure the owners would be all for whatever collective bargaining agreement changes they want to make. But how much more money are these owners willing to try and sneak out of fans, sneak out of the endorsements, and all that kind of shit? Because that's what they're looking at. When they say that they need more money for this or they need that, they need this. What does that mean for the owners? That means that they've got to look at their bottom line and go, where does that money come from? Now, if you own the baseball team, are you going to open up your checkbook and say, you know what, I'm willing to take less money for my family and what I'm doing? This is my organization. This is my business. I built this from the ground up. I've been the one investing. I got people to take care of, the staff and all of that kind of stuff. I got to worry about all the staffing and all that kind of stuff. Am I willing to take money out of my pocket just so these baseball players can have their way? Would you
No.
really do that? Exactly. I don't think so. So at the end of the day, I think Rob Manfred should be relaxing and carrying on and living his life because these are rich people. These aren't the workers at Kellogg's who were just on strike recently complaining because they don't have no good 401k, no benefits and stuff like that. They're not even made collectively, those workers, those 1,200 workers who went out on strike, they're not even making a fraction of what one MLB player is playing. So all these people who are crying about it's a bad look for Rob Manfred and all that stuff, they can go fly a kite.
Yeah, there are plenty of players though that don't make enough money to be good after baseball. There's probably on a major league roster maybe half of them who, are making multi-million dollars a year, and that's a lot.
But even if there's still even a minimum contract anywhere like $60,000 a year, that's a good paycheck for somebody for most people. I don't care what you're telling me to play baseball at that. There are people out there who are making $60,000 a year hanging from a scaffold, 60 stories up, welding stuff together. They're making barely $60,000 a year doing that. But yet a baseball player, all you got to do is show up and swing a bat and throw a ball real good, and they're complaining about that.
Yeah. No, I think the argument that they wanted to make, one of the points that the players wants is to raise the minimum salary $100,000 from 500 to 600. So that's ticky tack. One of the most interesting ones, Brandon, is that they want to expand the number of teams that make the playoffs every year now. And the players are backing that up. They want to expand it from 10, which it is now, which you got like 2 wild card games, something like that, 2 wild card teams per conference. And they want to go from 10, which it is now, they want to go to 14. And what they wanted to do here is they wanted to have 2 wild card games per year. So right now, I'm not sure actually. I
mean,
think
it
that
doesn't. Okay. So you're getting into a lot of detail, but all I'm hearing is dollar signs and zeros that ownership has to now come up and generate. Period. You're talking about adding more teams to the playoffs. That's a longer season, right? You're cutting down the game, the series, right? You got to cut down the series. So there has to be
Well, I don't know
made.
about that. I don't know if they're going to cut down the championship series.
Okay, but what I'm saying is either way, something has to be done, which equals dollars and zeros, correct? Because if there's more teams, there has to be more coverage. If there's more coverage, there has to be more games. There has to be more people involved. The stadiums have to be staffed of extra few weeks and stuff like that. Again, everything that the MLB players want equals bottom line dollars and zeros for the owners. And right now, I can almost certainly guarantee you that the owners are sick of giving 50% of their budget to one player. And then all of these other players going, well, we're not making enough money. Talk to the guy who's making $100 million a year to swing that bat, the same as you are, and then tell him to come up off some money to restructure his deal. And maybe the owners will be a little bit more willing to be like, okay, we'll sit there and help you guys figure out how we can get this stuff done. Because right now, all they're looking at the owner saying is we need more money for this. We need to change that and everything like that. And the owner's like, well, where are we supposed to get this money? Where are we supposed to do this? We're already tapping the fans for X, Y, and Z amount of dollars. When you were a kid, the ticket prices were how much? Probably not that much. You probably go to a game on the weekend every once in a while, right? At the spur of the moment, cheap seats, nosebleeds, and stuff like that. Nowadays, with inflation and the cost of everything, how much are those same tickets that you were getting back then? They're probably 3-4 times the same cost, for the same nosebleed seats.
It depends. Like for instance, if I go to a Devils hockey game, I could get pretty much cheap seats anywhere except right on the ice level, right against the glass. That's one thing. When you're talking about the Yankees, forget about it. Yeah, I mean, I'll drop like 80 to $100 on bad seats, like second tier seats or something like that in outfield. So no matter like, like obviously you're gonna sit behind home plate, then that's gonna be an arm and a leg no matter what. But I should expect that, like it was when I was a kid. If I went to a Yankees game, I sat in the nosebleeds, it was $20. That should be maybe like 30 or around that. But, and for the most part, I think it is. It is. But I think that the prize seats, the lower seats, first bowl seats are more expensive by a lot. And the reason for that is the player contracts going up. I mean, you had Mike Trout, right? A couple of years ago, he gets the $400 million contract for 13 years or some crazy thing. He's making $40 million a year. You got Max Scherzer going to the Mets. He's getting somewhere in that ballpark of money per year. So it's a hell of a lot of money. And you're right. Well, one of the things that's going on here is that people say that baseball is dying, is that it is not as popular. So if that's the case, and less people are watching it on TV and less people are going to the games, then that really should just be overall less money coming in to the owners, coming in to the sport. So, from that standpoint, I understand what you're saying about, you know, the owners don't have the money to give the players that they want.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's hard as a fan of baseball to sit there and watch this kind of stuff because it feels like almost every time they have a collective bargaining agreement time, there's a lockout. Like I feel like the last within the last 10 years, almost every season, almost like every other season, there's the threat of a lockout or threat they want to renegotiate and stuff like that. And I'm tired of
Yeah.
hearing about it. You know what I mean? Like I watch sports to get away from to not think about my life and the inequality in life and stuff like that. Like we watch sports because it's supposed to be equal, competition, level playing field and stuff like that. But then you see these guys sit here and complain about not making they want the minimum contract to be $500,000 instead of, I mean, $600,000 instead of $500,000. Do you guys understand how fucking petty that is? Really? It's like there are people out there
Yeah.
who can't even go to their job and ask for a 10% pay raise. But they're sitting here
And
wanting to
no.
Shanghai a whole baseball season simply because they're not making enough money or they feel like they need something else changed. Why do they want to put more teams in the playoffs? Why? Why do they need more teams in the playoffs? What is the rationale behind
No.
that? So then you have more exposure, more of these top end players can come in here and show off their stuff and we can have more. Like to me, it doesn't make any sense. It just seems like some guys are jaded because every year they're on the cusp, and maybe if they added a few more teams, they could finally get in there. To me, that's what it sounds like. That's exactly what it sounds like. It doesn't sound like they give two shits about the actual pageantry of baseball, the history, the tradition, the actual competitive spirit of it. Oh, well, we just want to make more baseball play teams, more play teams in the playoffs because we need more teams in the playoffs. Explain that.
Well, I think in terms of the negotiations with the owners, I think that expanding the playoffs perhaps allows more money, more revenue to come in. I mean, not perhaps, it does allow more revenue to come in for those wild card games, for those playoff games. So, is that a bargaining chip that the players are using since they're the ones supporting it, Brandon?
Obviously
Uh,
not, because they still haven't gotten the agreement signed. And the reason it's not is because the cost associated with it. Like they don't understand the cost that's associated with it. Because they have these agreements that they've done with all of these big TV producers and stuff like that. They're already inked. They're already collecting the money on that. You don't get to turn around a year into a deal or 2 years into the deal and be like, we need to renegotiate. They're going to look at them and go, no, you don't get to renegotiate. You're only 2 years into this deal and you haven't produced any more revenue. Your viewership has dropped, in fact.
yeah, I think listen, like I said, I think that's right. I think the game is struggling with viewership. I think they need to look at, like we've heard of, the robot umpires, um, stuff, anything that can, make the game more exciting to watch, make it go by faster. They did the thing a couple years ago where they They put a runner on second base in extra innings now, so that when you get to extra innings, you already got a guy in scoring position, and those games go by faster instead of having a game go to 20 innings or something like that.
Yeah.
So, those are some of the things that they could do that really change the way people watch it and make the game different. And I think they should consider that probably more than nickel and diming here about
Yeah.
salaries.
Yeah. So last topic, Carli Lloyd said she hated playing with the U.S. national women's team in the later years. The political climate, people talking about certain things, certain aspects and stuff like that. She just felt like it was an uncomfortable environment for her. And in my mind, when I think about it, it makes sense. When the majority of the team was probably against her point of view and her standpoint, she probably felt like she was attacked or ganged up on. But at the same time, it's like, why do you have to care? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
you're an adult, they're adults. If you don't say nothing about, their opinion, your opinion, then nobody else will say anything about it. You know what I mean? Like, she didn't have to
Yeah.
say anything to the she could have just let them talk, or just left the situation or put on headphones or whatever she needed to do to block out whatever they were saying. But for some reason, she probably felt like, oh, I have to have my say because they have their say and stuff like that, freedom of speech and woo 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 and stuff like that. But then she got her feelings hurt when it was more than one person telling her to shut the F up,
Yeah, I mean, I think we talked about this in a production meeting, keep the politics out of sports. Don't, whether you're a professional athlete or just you have a regular job, you don't have any business talking about your politics or, who you sleep with or what you do in bed or whatever. They talk about that, but like they talk about the, stuff, but you don't have to impose your beliefs. You should not impose your beliefs. I'm sorry. Right. In those settings. So, Carli Lloyd, I'm sure that, listen, like she's on speaking terms with her teammates or whatever. She could talk about, I didn't really like this, or, I don't agree with this that's going on with our country or something like that. But if she's going to take a stance on like a social issue, like gun violence or something like that, let's just say gun violence and say that she owns a gun and her, her family members support owning gun. And when, somebody gets shot at a traffic stop by a cop or something like that, and she's taking a stance like, well, it's their fault, not the cop or whatever, stuff like that. That's not right. That's her opinion, but she shouldn't necessarily be, voicing that for everybody to hear, Brandon. And
Yeah, I'm one of those people that, like, I'm a firm believer that, you have to keep your opinions to yourself when your opinion is in the minority, right? Like, you can talk about your opinion if you want to, but when the majority of people think it's a shit opinion, you risk being shit on by a lot of people. Like, that's just the law of large numbers. You can sit there and go into a room and say, I like pineapple with pizza. How many people are going to make fun of you for that? Probably like 90% of the room. You didn't have to go in there and announce that, but you did. You get what I'm saying? Like, that's the kind of stuff that's the kind of scenario. That's what I'm talking about. Like, she didn't have to go into any setting with her teammates and engage in any of that conversation. But I can almost certainly guarantee you that she did. She let herself be sucked into it. And I understand that she has a dissenting view. I understand that she's allowed to have it, but they're allowed to shit on her because of it. They're allowed to make fun of her, talk bad about her, say whatever they want because of it. Because as long as she's got freedom of speech, so do they. Right. And no one is above consequence. Right. Like, the whole point, the reason we feel shame, or the reason that people shame us, or the reason that that people are willing to correct us, is because that's what has to happen in society. When a society tells you, when the majority of people are telling you that something is wrong, you need to correct it, right? You need to fix it. That's how it works. That's how things change. So when she has a crappy opinion and 90% of her teammates are like, that's a crappy opinion, maybe she needs to reevaluate what she's saying in her opinion, because it's not her teammates. And the reason she couldn't get along with them was because she couldn't just shut up. She couldn't just go there, play soccer, and keep her mouth shut, because I've been around people like that, and they don't heart my vibe, my mellow. Why? Because I don't talk to them. I just go about my business. I've had teammates and friends and colleagues and stuff like that that I don't like, that have had opinions that are different than mine, but I don't have to say anything to them. I can go about my merry way and exist in the same space that they do without ever having to engage in them with conversation.
It's a good point. Yeah, and I mean, everybody has a right to freedom of speech, right? And it's just about understanding the consequences. And I think that Carli Lloyd, like you said, thought she was above the consequences, and there's a reason why she would think that, right? I mean, she's only been touted as the best female soccer player ever.
Mm-hmm.
And listen, I mean, her accomplishments, winning like multiple World Cups, I think two, scoring a hat trick in like one of the finals and something like that, they're great. And lo and behold, she's from New Jersey too, and that's cool, but it doesn't make you above the law. It doesn't make you superior to your teammates. Everybody on her team, they're professional soccer players too. And, I guess they don't, care too much to hear, her opinion on something that's in the minority. They don't care too much to hear, well, here, this is Carli Lloyd. You got to deal with her and you have to agree with her on everything. And, I think that speaks to the strength of the U.S. women's national team players who dissented from her.
Yeah.
So,
that is our show for tonight. Thank you guys for watching. I'm Brandon. As always, that's Anthony. Thanks again for watching. Have a good night. Peace.